You are now listening to the Unscripted Ohio Podcast, brought to you by Buckeye Grove. For all the latest Buckeyes news, analysis, reaction, and the best Ohio State community on the entire internet, head over to BuckeyeGrove.com or follow us on Twitter at Ohio State Rivals. Without any further delay, it's time to get unscripted, broadcasting from Podcast Central, a place that is not his mother's basement.
Hey, Mom! We get some meatloaf!
We promise. Here's your host, Kyle Lamb.
Hey, Mom! The meatloaf!
Good Friday. Welcome back to the Unscripted Ohio Podcast. I am Kyle Lamb, host of this fine establishment. We are brought to you by BuckeyeGrove.com. Thanks for listening, everybody. Good to be with you again as we preview Ohio State and Maryland coming up here later on the show. The Buckeyes hoping to come back from that encouraging win in East Lansing against Michigan State last week. We will preview the game from the Maryland perspective with Pat Donahue. He is a beat writer for the Terrapin Sports Report. He will be on to tell us about Maryland. Of course, they are undergoing a quarterback change again for the second year in a row. Kasim Hill goes down with a season-ending injury. This, of course, was a little bit later in the season. Last year, it happened from the very get-go early in the year. This time, it's happening towards the end, but he will be again replaced by Tyrell Pigram. We will get into that, as well as the DJ Durkin stuff, all the controversy that Maryland has got on as a program. We'll get into all that with him, and I have some of my own thoughts here on what I expect from Ohio State and this game. But I will get into that a little bit later in the show. Why, you ask? Because, you know, during football season, we normally lead off with football. It's a bigger story. There are fewer games. Obviously, you get in to late in the season, and every game is huge. I mean, Ohio State, obviously, it goes without saying, duh, I know, this is common sense here, but Ohio State cannot afford a loss. So, needless to say, all the marbles are on the line for the Buckeyes this weekend in College Park. Now, that being said, they are a 14.5, I think now 15-point favorite. It opened up at 17 and it got down to 14, but now it's kind of gone back up by a point or two. We'll see if that trend continues throughout the day and as it gets closer to kickoff. But all of this is the long way to say. Today, I'm going to lead off with some basketball talk because I'm a basketball guy, and, man, it's hard not to get excited. It's crazy that it's still November 16th, and there is just a lot to love about Buckeye basketball right now. Ohio State now 3-0 after a 69-60 win at Creighton, and Ohio State now has road wins to start the season. First 10 days of the season, they have road wins at Cincinnati and at Creighton. And, folks, I mean, you're going to have a hard time finding too many road wins that are as good as either one of those at this point in the season by anybody, let alone Ohio State having two such road wins. I mean, Cincinnati and Creighton both could wind up being bubble teams. It's hard to say. I'm not going to call either one surefire NCAA tournament teams just yet, but both of them certainly have the capability and the prospects of being tournament teams when all is said and done. But even if you ignore all of that right now, there are many impressive takeaways from Thursday night from this Ohio State team. We've talked so much about Ohio State in the first couple games as far as their effort, their intensity, their attitude. These are hallmarks, are quickly becoming hallmarks of Chris Holtmann's program, and these are the intangibles that we're missing from the last couple of seasons under Thad Matta. And I don't hold Thad Matta personally responsible for much of that. I think there are a lot of reasons why that was. I think maybe, I believe that teams take on the personality of their coaches. And I think with Thad's medical issues, I really think his lack of ability to get fired up and run up and down the sidelines and get everybody pumped up, man, that used to be great. You go back and watch the early years under Thad Matta. He would wear a trail out on the sidelines of Value City Arena or any opposing court. When they went on the road, I mean, he was just so into the games. And it's unfortunate that because of that, botched surgery and his drop foot, he was just not able to ever do that. And I think it really zapped him of his energy and his emotion. And I think that combined with all of the turnover and the assistant coaches and eventually recruiting caught up and really suffered because of it, all of those things led to the program just imploding as far as a lack of energy, a lack of effort, a lack of desire. And those things just became completely dormant from the program. The last couple of years, they just were not there. And you throw that on top of the fact that talented guys were either not being developed or, for whatever reason, just not getting the most out of their ability. And you had a lot of, I don't know, they were just going through the motions out there. The program just didn't seem right. But quickly, Chris Holtmann has turned that around. And this in his second season, we are seeing a lot of fire from this group. And I tell you what I like. And I mentioned this on the Horseshoe Lounge on Buckeye Grove in my post-game observations, and I'm going to share it here too. You know, Chris Holtmann said after the Fort Wayne game last week where Ohio State went off, for a 107-61 win, he said, I felt like there were a lot of mistakes that got covered up by our torrid shooting. And I agree with him. But that's also a good thing in a way, because Ohio State last year didn't have, they had some games where they had torrid shooting nights, but I tell you what, they also, especially down the stretch, they also had a lot of nights where they just weren't hitting on all cylinders if they didn't have Keita Bates-Diop bringing at least his B game. And a lot of that was because they counted on Keita to do so much, but also because they just didn't have a lot of guys on a given night that could put the ball in the basket. Now, when Cam Williams was hitting and Jayshawn Tate would step out and hit a couple, Caleb Weston would step out and hit a couple, they had some guys and they had some nights where they could hit a lot of shots. But most nights, if Caleb wasn't on fire, they weren't hitting from three-point range. And that's not to say they weren't able to win some games without the three-point shot being there, but they really had a razor-thin margin for error in terms of shooting the ball. I like this team so far because while they don't have a lot of guys, I think Dwayne Washington maybe is the only guy I can see potentially being a 40% type of shooter with any regularity. They don't have a lot of guys like him, but they've got 6 or 7 guys that on any given night can catch fire and put the ball in the basket. And I think that's something that they were lacking last year. So they got really hot in the first half of this basketball game against Creighton, and it really did cover up, once again, like Chris was talking about against Purdue-Fort Wayne. It kind of covered up some of the problems they were having. Offensively, they did not play a good basketball game. C.J. Jackson had his best game of his Ohio State career against Purdue-Fort Wayne. He had his worst game of his Ohio State career this game against Creighton. But here's the thing. They stuck with it. They had a couple guys step up, made big shots in the first half. Keyshawn Woods went for 15 in the first half. You had Dwayne Washington step up, went for 8 in the first half. They made a run without CJ on the floor, without Caleb Weston on the floor, because both of them were just terribly inefficient offensively. They were making really bad turnovers, making bad passing decisions, bad shot selection. They just never were in a rhythm together, especially when either one were on the floor. But Ohio State got hot. They made a lot of shots. They weren't great defensively in the first half, but they did just enough against the Creighton team, which, by the way, I think that Creighton team is really good, or is going to be really good offensively, because they run their sets so well. They have a lot of motion. They force you to defend for 30 seconds. They really put Ohio State in a lot of tough spots because of how aggressive they were with the ball screen. So I'm really impressed with that Creighton team offensively. I think they're going to continue to get better. They haven't played great in the first couple of games, but I think they're going to be a really good team down the stretch, and I think this is going to wind up looking like a very good win. But Ohio State, what can you say about them? Creighton went on the inevitable second half run. They wind up going up by 4 at one point late in the second half. Ohio State was down 60-56. And I know how many, raise your hand. You can tell me on Twitter at KYLam8. Raise your hand. Tell me, when it was 60-56, Ohio State had had given up that 12-point halftime lead, and Creighton eventually takes the lead, goes up by 4, how many of you thought the game was over at that point? But what happened to Ohio State? As soon as it's up 4, Dwayne Washington goes right back down, nails a 3. They're back down 1. They finish the game on a 13-0 run. And that right there is the hallmark, what we're seeing of this Chris Holtmann team. They fight, they scrap, they don't give up. And this team so far, we've seen it twice now, Cincinnati and Creighton. They didn't necessarily shoot well the entire game, but man, they just keep in it and they keep going at you with all this intensity, this effort, and the stick-to-itness, and they hit just enough shots when they need to, make just enough plays when they need to. C.J. Jackson is the best example of this. At one point, he was, 0 of 7 from the field with 5 turnovers or something like that. But what does he do? He hits a three-pointer with 2 minutes left. He hits that little baby hook shot in the paint. He gets a free throw. C.J. Jackson played a terrible game, but at the end of the game, when his team needed him the most, he came through. If I had told you coming into this game that Ohio State would win at Creighton with C.J. Jackson and Caleb Wesson putting up the stat line they did, you all would have said I was crazy, because there's just no way, with those two being important as they are, there's no way you could comprehend Ohio State winning a game like this. I'm not ready to say this Ohio State team is a surefire tournament team. And the reason I'm not ready to say that is not necessarily that I'm not... Ohio State looks like a tournament team, but I'm not ready to say it because, man, I got to tell you, the Big Ten is looking really tough right now. I'm not sure that there's a title contender in this league as of right now, but I got to tell you, Michigan State, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Indiana all look like surefire tournament teams right now. Purdue, I think, is a tournament team. Iowa, getting a nice win against Oregon. I think Iowa is going to be a tournament team potentially. Ohio State looking like a tournament team. You throw in some other contenders in there, Northwestern and Maryland, maybe even Illinois. I'm not ready to write off Illinois because of a loss to Georgetown. But there are, I think, 7 to 10 teams that are NCAA. Actually, I would say 11 teams right now that are NCAA tournament caliber basketball teams in this league. I don't think they're going to get 11, obviously. I think when it's all said and done, I think there's a chance of 6, 7, or 8 teams. But Ohio State, definitely in the mix. I think they're playing as well as anybody in the country, just when you look at what they have done on the resume. They're not... I don't mean to say that they're a top 10 team. They're not playing as well as anybody. Duke and Kansas are on a different level than Ohio State right now, so I don't want you to get the wrong idea there. But when you look at the resume, those 2 road wins, nobody else can match that on a profile right now 10 days into the season. So Ohio State basketball, what can you say? Get on the bandwagon. If you have not watched this Buckeye basketball team, or if you've watched it just very little, I promise you, jump on the bandwagon now, because this is going to be a team you are going to want to watch. They're fun to watch. They have a lot of personality. They give effort. They leave everything out on the floor. Even on nights where they're not making shots, I promise you, they are going to be a lot of fun. All right, we're joined now here on the Unscripted Ohio podcast with Pat Donahue, staff and beat writer for Maryland on Terrapin Sports Report. Pat, I appreciate you taking the time here to preview this game here for this weekend.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kyle.
So let's start with the news of the week for Maryland. Kasim Hill out for the year with a torn ACL, and I got to be honest. Looking at this statistically, I'm not sure if we know if this is a loss or much of a loss for Maryland, given Tyrell Pigram's success when he came in last year for Hill, albeit in abbreviated time. He seems to add more of a running dimension to the offense. What does this do to the Maryland offense with Pigram taking over?
Well, yeah, you kind of alluded to it there. It certainly shifts it more to a run-oriented attack. Pigram he can throw the ball. He has a strong arm. He's got a nice deep ball at times, but he does struggle with accuracy on those short to intermediate throws, and He's not the tallest quarterback. He I think struggles a little bit to see over the offensive line at times. Maryland has a typical Big Ten sort of offensive line, a big offensive line. And, he doesn't have necessarily the pocket presence of a Kasim Hill, but he's good at getting outside of the pocket and making throws from time to time. But his strength's definitely running the ball. He's very, very quick. He's very good at finding openings and seams to cut up and get first downs and scramble for some yards. So he has that explosiveness aspect to the offense. He can rip a 50-yarder off, a 60-yarder off, but he certainly changes the offense to make it a little bit more one-dimensional.
So I want to ask you about Anthony McFarland. He ran for 210 yards on 29 carries this past week against Indiana. Beforehand, they kind of had a three-headed monster there where the carries were being distributed pretty evenly. What was it that caused him to get nearly 30 carries? I mean, obviously he had a successful game. Was that by design, or did it just work out that way, the way the game progressed?
Yeah, no, he's Maryland's probably most talented offensive player this season, and certainly at the moment. And I think it's just a matter of when other things aren't working, getting him the ball as much as you can and feeding your workhorse. And I think he has become Maryland's workhorse at this point in the season, even as a freshman. He actually broke Maryland's single-season freshman rushing record last week on a single-game basis and for a season. So he is certainly getting more and more run moving forward, and I think it's actually a good idea because, like I said, he's the most talented guy on the offense right now, and he's been hard for any defense to stop.
Maryland's averaging, almost 6 yards a carry this year. They've obviously been very successful with the run game. Do you think Maryland will rely even more heavily this week on that, or do you still think they're going to try to balance the, throws and have Pigram try to take apart Ohio State's defense with the pass game? How conservative or aggressive do you see them being this week?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the way Ohio State's offense is playing this year especially, I think running the ball and trying to control the clock might be, even if it wasn't Maryland's strength, which it is, but even if it wasn't, I think that would be a decent game plan for a team that's going to have to come in with their backup quarterback and try to maybe slop this game up a little bit and manage it and take the ball out of Dwayne Haskins' hands and the Ohio State offense's hands. So I certainly expect them to go with that route, not only because it seems like the smart thing to do, but also because that is their strength, and they can have success running the ball even against some of the best teams. So, I expect to see a lot of Anthony McFarland. They're hoping to have Ty Johnson back this week. He did return last week from an injury, but I think he might have re-injured himself or just wasn't, back to game shape because he didn't get much run after that. Obviously, it was all Anthony McFarland. But you can't forget about Tayon Fleet-Davis and Javon Leake either, who have had their moments this year too. So it'll be a multi-pronged attack, and I expect most of it to be on the ground, yes.
Yeah, Pat, this is a Maryland defense that, is very, very, very experienced. They have a lot of juniors, seniors, grad transfers, fifth-year seniors. So, and the numbers bear that out as they've had a lot of success, giving up just 23, 24 points a game and in the top 50 nationally in total defense. So they have had some success. Mm-hmm. What kind of style defense is this? And a lot of opponents have been playing Ohio State to bring up the extra, defenders there in the box to try to take away the run game. Do you see Maryland carrying that out as a defensive strategy this week?
Yeah, I think that they're going to have to definitely be cognizant of Ohio State's running game and keep that box loaded. The strength of the defense is, I would say, in the secondary. A couple of very talented DBs led by Darnell Savage, who's having a great year at safety, and they also slide him into play nickel quite a bit. So I think they will trust their DBs to match up, even though Ohio State has great receivers in Paris Campbell and KJ Hill, but I think that they'll trust the defensive backs to match up with them and then try and put a few extra guys or a guy or two in the box to negate the run game and make sure that Ohio State can't dictate the pace. I think that Trey Watson will be a big guy in stopping the run. He's one of the grad transfers you alluded to, and I think that another transfer, Byron Cowart, former #1 recruit, is having a great year as well, and I think that he will also, help stop the run from the defensive line.
I kind of want to ask you a little bit about the where the program is at in your opinion. Especially with the fan base. What's the mood there with the tumultuous season going from DJ Durkin's suspension and then being reinstated and then a day later being terminated. Where is Maryland as a I guess emotionally and psychologically within the fan base right now?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and honestly, I wish I had a better answer for you because I've been saying all year this has been one of the hardest teams, hardest situations, I guess you could say, to gauge all season long. I haven't really known what to expect from Maryland as a team, at least on the field wise, from game to game. They've been a bit of Jekyll and Hyde. Obviously, their record reflects that as well. But I do think that this is a team that is playing for each other, that is playing for the coaches and the administration and staff that remains with them. And I think that, they're used to not having necessarily full stadiums every single Saturday. That's probably not their focus right now. I think that they are more focused on, each other, trying to get a sixth win to make a bowl game and make, a success out of a, as you said, tumultuous season.
I assume right now the plan is to get through the season and then conduct a national coaching search for the next head coach. Is that where Maryland seems to be at right now?
Yeah, I know they did just hire a committee, I believe, and I hope I'm not misspeaking. Actually, I can't remember where the committee's from. It's somewhere not in Maryland, but it is a committee that was hired to help with the coaching search. I believe that coaching search is set to start once the season wraps up, because obviously they want to focus on this season at the moment. But yes, it'll be a national search, and there are several names that are being floated around out there. But for the time now, it's Matt Canada's team, and he will certainly, especially if he were to get a sixth win and get them to a bowl game, he will certainly be in the conversation.
Well, Pat, I can tell you this, having been here in Columbus and seen the dysfunction with all the stuff going around with Ohio State right now, I can feel for you, man, with the stuff that you guys are putting up with having to cover. It's a strange season for both programs, I can tell you that. Yeah,
it's certainly different from seasons past, I'll tell you that much.
It sure is. Pat Donahue, you can catch his work on Terrapin Sports Report. You can also catch him on Twitter at SportsDownPat. He covers Maryland as a beat writer for Terrapin Sports Report. Pat, I appreciate you taking this time, and best of luck to you, man.
Thank you, Kyle. Enjoy the game.
Stretch runtime here at Unscripted Ohio. Kick up your feet as we cross the finish line with the Buckeye Beat, the latest in Ohio State news and notes.
Kick the tires and light the fires, Big Daddy.
All right, I'm going to put it on cruise control now as we wrap the show up here. I want to reflect a little bit before I go on Ohio State, Michigan State, or rather Ohio State, Maryland, on the heels of Ohio State's win against Michigan State. What are you thinking? I want to hear from you on Twitter at KYLam8. How do you feel about this one? Is it a trap? I know there's the old adage, if you see the trap coming, maybe it's not a trap. I actually think this one, it could be a trap. But I actually feel like Ohio State is going to come out and build off of the momentum that they've had the last 2 weeks. Even the Nebraska game, I said this so many times. Said it after the Nebraska game, said it again after the Michigan State game. I thought the Nebraska game was a small step forward for Ohio State. There were some signs of improvement with the line. Obviously, Ohio State rushing for 200 yards that game. There was some continued improvement, or there was some improvement with the secondary against Nebraska, the defensive line playing a little bit better, but then they carried it over and really had a huge step forward defensively against Michigan State. And the offensive line did not play great, but it stepped up and played well in the second half when it needed to against the top-ranked rush defense in the country, at least statistically speaking. So I really like where Ohio State is at right now. I think you're going to see an incorporation a little bit of Tate Martell once again into the offense, because I think he gave some life to the Ohio State offense when they were stagnant early in that game against the Spartans. And I think you're going to see a very heavy tape package. Boy, that sounds really dirty when I say that. You're going to see a very heavy dose of Tate Martell against Michigan, because I think Ohio State is going to need something. They're going to need to shake things up against the Michigan defense to get some momentum going. I think Tate Martell offers that possibility. And so the logical extension, I think, is to build off of what they did by bringing him into the game against Michigan State. I think they're going to do that against a solid Maryland defense this week. I think you'll see more of Tate Martell, and I think you're going to see the offense continue to build off of the run game that we've seen incrementally better the last 2 weeks. The defense also, this quarterback change scares me just a little bit just because of the running ability of Tyrone Pigram. He's a little bit further along, obviously, in that department. Kasim Hill could not run. And there's not a big drop-off in passing ability either. I mean, not that Kasim Hill was a very accurate, very good passer, but he could make a few more passes than Pigram can make. But I don't think you're going to see a big difference in the passing game. Unfortunately, I actually think because of the run defense, or because of the run ability of Pigram, I think that actually adds a little bit more dimension to the Maryland offense. But either way, although that ability of his ability to run does scare me just a little bit, I think you're going to see Ohio State come out and continue to build. It's up, like I said earlier, at a 15, 16-point spread. I like Ohio State to win by 21+ in this game. I think we're finally going to see an eruption, and I think we're going to see Ohio State hitting its stride going into the game next week, and then we'll have something to really talk about next week in the show as we preview the game. It should be a good one, but I'm not overlooking Maryland. I think this is a tough test. Maryland is not an easy win by any stretch of the imagination, but I liked what I saw out of the Buckeyes against Michigan State. And I think Ohio State builds off of this and wins by 21+. I'm going to say 38-17 Ohio State in this one, as they win by 21 on the road against a decent Maryland team. And then Ohio State goes into Michigan with Tate Martell involved in the offense next week. And despite the fact that I do believe Michigan's defense is legit, I think they're really good, I also think Ohio State is going to give them everything that they can handle next weekend. So that is going to wrap it up for the show. Reminder on Monday that we will have Kirk Barton and Ross Fulton joining me for our weekly roundtable as we dissect what happened in the game with Ohio State and Maryland. And then, of course, we will start looking ahead next week as I preview Ohio State and Michigan. And I have several things that I'm working on to preview the game for next week. So really excited about this. It should be a fun week of football next week. And, of course, we'll talk a little bit of Ohio State basketball as well, because they certainly have earned the attention. But it is the game next week. So starting on Monday, Kirk, Ross, and I will break down what happened over the weekend, and we'll start looking ahead. And, of course, it'll be Thanksgiving week, so hope everybody has a great week next week anyhow. So join us again on Monday. Of course, we are on Buckeye Grove every Monday and Friday. You can catch us on the archives, SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Catch me on Twitter at KYLam8. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Hope you have a great weekend. We'll be back at it Monday to talk about it. Have a great one, folks. Go Bucks.
You can get new episodes of Unscripted Ohio on Mondays and Fridays exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all things Ohio State.